So I'd like to introduce my first guest, Vince Crespin. Vince, would you share with the audience a little bit about you?
Okay, yeah, like you said, my name is Vince Crespin. I grew up in Bernalillo, and my later years, teen years, I moved to the Four Corners. I graduated from Bloomfield High School. Right after that, I went to the Marine Corps. My family, my dad and my brother, some uncles of my brothers and my dad, they were in law enforcement. And when I got out of the Marine Corps, I myself went into law enforcement. And I stayed in law enforcement for 25, 30 years. I still work in a law enforcement capacity somewhat. I'm an investigator with the state agency.
So your time with the Marine Corps, what did you do? What was your specialty?
In the Marine Corps, we call it a MOS, a military occupational specialty. I was in motor transport. I drove. I transported troops, cargo, you name it. But I drove.
And where'd you spend most of your time, Vince?
I went to boot camp in San Diego, Marine Corps Recruit Depot there. And then after that, I went to my school in Camp Pendleton. From Camp Pendleton, I went to 29 Palms. That's in the desert in California. One of the least likable places in the Marine Corps because it's hot in the summer. And then I went from there. My last year and a half in the Marine Corps, I went overseas. I spent time in Okinawa, mainland Japan, and Korea.
Wow. Vinny, and when you came out of the military, did you go straight into law enforcement, or what'd you do?
No, I didn't. I since I drove in the Marine Corps, I drove a truck. I worked for some construction pipeline companies in the Four Corners area, and I drove pipeline from or out to oil fields and stuff, and my family was in law enforcement, and the construction trade was slowing down. So I myself looked into I thought, I thought I'd go into law enforcement for a little while until the trucking industry picked back up. I actually wanted to be a truck driver. I was interested in driving and considered going over the road. But I had hopes of getting my CDL and take it from there. Law enforcement was supposed to be just a slight detour. It turned into 25 years.
Where'd you start your law enforcement career?
I started in Vaughan. I had actually applied with state police in Albuquerque, and back in the mid 80s, I don't know if you remember, mid to late 80s, state police was only having one class a year, and they just had one. And I passed everything, and I went through the process, but they were taking a long time, and I still had a ways to go till they started a class. APD was the same way. And we had a family friend, a friend of my uncle's actually, and he needed help down south and told me he would get me certified right away, and I could go wherever I wanted after that. So I was anxious to be in law enforcement, so I did. I went down there, and I went to Vaughan. I started in Vaughan. I was there about a little over a year.
So let's see, I came out of the academy in 1982. The academy started in July. I graduated in October. I was in the 41st class, and you're right. At that time, state police were putting out one class a year, and I was I was initially assigned to Gallina, and we'll talk more about that later on. But eventually, I was assigned to Santa Rosa, and Vaughan was part of the patrol I worked. In 1985, were you
No,
in?
I started in 89.
In 89?
November of 89. I actually got out of the Marine Corps. I went into the Marine Corps in 84. And back then, 84 was the last year you can do a general enlistment for 3 years. After that, it was going to be 4 years active, 2 inactive. I went under a general enlistment, 3 years active, 3 inactive. That means after you get out, you do your 3 years mandatory, they can call you back at any time if they need to. But anyway, I got out in 87. I went in 84, got out in 87, and then I started, I worked construction area and driving in construction for about a year and a half. That was about the time I got out in September of '87, and then in about '80. I drove till about '88, and I moved back from the Four Corners. I moved back down here to Bernalillo, and I started doing. That's when I did slow down up there. So I started doing security, armed security, and waiting to get into a law enforcement trade. But then once I worked armed security in a bank, and then in November of '89 I started in Vaughan.
So, so you were in Vaughan how many years? How long
I
were you
was
there?
just there a little over a year.
And where'd you go from there?
Santa Fe County. Santa Fe County.
And you were in Santa Fe County
For 11 years.
11 years?
Yes.
You worked under a few sheriffs or
I worked under two sheriffs.
two sheriffs?
Yeah. Benji Montaño and Ray Cisneros.
Yeah, I remember them both. So, and from there you went where, Vinny?
Espanola.
Why'd you leave the Santa Fe SO and go with the
I actually
PD?
worked with your brother. I didn't like the way they treated his case. There was some other cases that happened, and there was some other stuff that happened on duty where I was put on admin leave for a while. I came out of it okay, but it left a sour taste in my mouth the way it was handled. And I realized that people can make accusations against you, and you want to stand up and you want to fight them. You want to clear your name and everything. My name wasn't sullied in this one. I mean, it was pretty much handled internally, but just the accusations that were made.
It just leaves a bad taste in your mouth,
Yes,
and it's hard to feel loyal after that.
She 2 years went by, and the last day she wanted to sue. I'm putting the cart in front of the horse. I got into it with the county management. They wanted action taken against me. I'd been there 11 years, and I made rank really fast. I did really good there. I was one of the better employees there, but just the way it was handled, I didn't like it. So I talked to my then girlfriend, wife now, told her I didn't want to be in law enforcement anymore. And I left law enforcement in 2001.
How long were you out?
I didn't want to come back. I was out. I wasn't even out long. I was out about 10 months. And then I started getting calls from your brother, Gino, and a few other Espanola PD guys. They were having some problems here. They were shorthanded. They wanted me to come and work here. Asked me if I wanted to come and work here. And I declined. But then they kept, hey, come on, we can come and work. And I was doing good out there. I was driving for a limousine company, making some really good money. I was also working for a sporting goods company. And I don't know, after about 10 months, I started to miss it a little. The benefits were good. So I came back. I came back to Espanola.
And so how long were you with the Espanola Police Department?
Almost 7 years.
So I think, Vinny, if I recall correctly, and if I'm getting ahead, but I think that's when you came with me. You were with
Yes, right after Espanola, we got into that. They brought in a new chief, the current mayor after Richard Cook, I think that was his name, after he left.
Richard Lucero.
Lucero. After he left, the new mayor, him and I had a falling out. He wanted we were a new union. We unionized, and he wanted us to endorse him. The union body didn't want to get involved in the election. So I told them they don't want to. They don't want to endorse anybody, so we're not. I was elected as the president. I brought the union to Espanola City and PD. There was two separate charters. We were actually the first, the smallest charter that AFSCME ever represented at the time. We only had like 12 members. And it took a lot. They wanted to put us under the umbrella of the city charter. Because when I invited the union over and I started talking to them, there was an IT guy from the city of Espanola. He started talking to them too, and he organized the city workers. They wanted to put us under them, and I said, no, we have way much different needs than they do. So they agreed, and they gave us our own charter. And then when this new mayor came in, he was pretty upset because we wouldn't endorse him, and he made it really difficult for us. He wanted to break up our union. We were negotiating with the city at the time, and he brought in a chief whose main mission in life was to get rid of me at any cost. I mean, this guy, he came from the FBI. I think he suffered from little man syndrome. I know he did, and just an arrogant guy. Tried to bring his big department thinking to small town America, and it just didn't work that way. He had a good group of guys. There was some people there that needed to go, and they went. And that was it. Deal with it. Let's move on. And just a guy. He was very arrogant. He was very demeaning to the troops. He only had his interests at heart. Nothing. No interest of the city. Anyway, he launched like about 5 or 6 IAs against me. None of them stuck. He had one of his lieutenants spying on us out there. We caught him one night by the fire station taking pictures of us. We cornered him. He tried to say he was surveilling a drug house with no houses around there. He did all that stuff, and finally there was some city employees that were stealing from the city. I was the president of the union. I was negotiating with the city, so I was in tight with a finance person. Her and I got along, and there was a time where we were working weed and seed. It's a program on the west side on our bikes, and we were making a lot of overtime. It was unlimited overtime, and we were like everybody at the time, we were claiming zero, or not zero, we were claiming more dependents like you could. We were changing our tax forms and getting more money. There was several people from the city that were overpaid. That also included myself and 2 other officers. And they caught the finance girls. There was 2 of them. They caught them embezzling, and they thought that we were involved in it because we got overpaid. But several other people had got overpaid too, and they put us on admin leave and said that we were involved in a scheme to, committing fraud, larceny, and embezzlement, and we weren't. And they ended up. They had a hearing. A sham. They did some half-ass investigation, which we debunked later on. We showed them that their investigation was at best, not what happened. So then I was ultimately terminated in July of August. I believe it was August of 2009, and it was August. It was August, I think. August of 2009. I was terminated, and I appealed, and we appealed, and that was a sham too. The hearing officer was friends and classmates with the city attorney. We ended up getting indicted for fraud, larceny, and embezzlement. And they indicted us on racketeering, and we went.
But eventually all this got cleared up.
Yes, for 2 of us, charges were dropped. I had a letter from the lady who was embezzling saying that they were the ones embezzling and that us officers had nothing to do with it. I mean, this was delivered by her attorney to my attorney. And the charges, once my attorney spoke with the DA, he dropped the charges immediately. He said, these guys aren't involved. I left with Espanola owing me like $600. Wow. I didn't even want it because, as far as I was concerned, they could stick it. But anyway, they dismissed charges on 2 of us because they knew now we had no involvement in that. One of the officers, they took him to trial, and his attorney motioned for a directed verdict on that, and it was granted. And the judge was even quoted in the paper as saying that there was nothing there, that the officers did nothing when we were accused of taking money or being overpaid, that it was all paid back, and it was. They said we were overpaid. We gave them whatever they said we overpaid. And he threw the case out, his case, and he said that it basically, it was a bunch of crap.
So at some point, Vinny, you applied with the sheriff's office.
I did, yes.
And tell me, what was it that made you apply with the sheriff's office, and share with me what the first days were like.
Well, I didn't even want to go back to law enforcement. It was done. It was done. I had a, I was done. And, after everything was said and done, the charges were dropped. But then I thought, I said, there's, I left there, and there's a lot of people that think that I did this and I didn't. So how can I move past it? And I said, shit, I'll just reapply and go back, show them that, you knocked me down, but I got back up. And so when my former chief was there working at the sheriff's office with you, and I had talked to him actually. I don't remember if he called me or I called him, but we spoke because I know one of the guys was going over there that was in this case with the city with me. And he kept telling me, hey, let's go apply there, let's go apply. So I did, I applied, you hired me. And it was kind of, I hadn't been in almost 2 years. I hadn't been in law enforcement, so it was kind of strange, And then the academy picked up our case, so we had that looming over us, right? So when I started with the sheriff's office, I was a deputy. I was taking calls, working nights, days, whatever I was told to work, and it was different. I'd been with the city PD before. I'd worked with the sheriff's office before, so I was used to the territory, driving far.
Let me ask you, Vinny, and I apologize.
Oh.
Share with us what the difference, because you had worked with Santa Fe Sheriff's Office. So now we're at a point where you're working with the Río Arriba Sheriff's Office. They're both sheriff's offices, but share with me what the difference was, or the difference at that time.
At that time, Santa Fe was bigger. It was a bigger department, had a lot more deputies than Rio Arriba, and they had some specialty units there. So you went out there, and if you had a major case, you had help. You had a detectives division, or you had a SWAT team, or you had a K-9 unit. You had different divisions. You had a traffic unit that could take, But when I got there to Rio Arriba, we didn't have specialty divisions, so to speak. We handled our own cases. I think there was a couple of guys who did detective work, but we pretty much did our own stuff. You know what I mean? In that regard. So it was, like I said, it was smaller. So we worked harder. It was a lot of work. It was a busy office, and there was a lot of work. Like in Santa Fe, you had the process servers, you had the separate court security and transports, you had the separate warrants division, you had the separate, sex offender registry lookup. That was the warrant division's job. The court security guys, they had their own division, which they had their own people who can go and focus on that. And with the Rio Arriba Sheriff's Office, you just had this core. They had all the deputies who were there, did everything. Today they could be serving process. Tomorrow they were transporting prisoners. But then after they were done, they were taking calls. You know what I mean? From one end of the county to the other. It's a big county.
The one thing, Vinny, that I that I do have to say, and I want to thank you, is I remember that it didn't take long for me to realize that we needed. The commission never gave us what we needed. So the sheriff's office was never set up to succeed. It never was. But I knew that I wanted to provide the county with a service they had never had. And I knew that what it was going to take was the deputies volunteering time. And I know that you led that effort, and I appreciate it. But at a certain point, we started doing work that had never been done there before. What was that like, Vinny? Because you took the lead in a lot of this.
We were doing a lot of search warrants. We hired a guy who had some undercover experience. He went and did undercover work for us, and we were doing our own stuff. We were handling our own murder investigations. We had 1 year, if you remember, 2012. It was like every other week there was either a homicide or a death investigation under suspicious circumstances or a drug bust. You know, it was different. It was fast paced, and
just to set the tone, Vince, so before I became sheriff, the administration before me was basically a mom and pop operation. They worked fixed hours. There was no effort to try and cover, the 24 hours. They were basically doing sheriff's duties, and those included transport, civil process, court security, registry, and the sexual offender program. So that's all they were doing. When I came on, I went to dispatch and I told them that I wanted to start taking calls on rotation. And state police, at least the Espanola administration, took advantage of that. You know, I really think that at a certain point they thought they would make us fail. And you're right, I think it was 2012 where we had one murder investigation after another. And I think in a lot of those murder cases, you were taking the lead, at least as a supervisor.
Yeah, I did. I oversaw all of them. And there was, we had some other deputies from other agencies. We had a couple of deputies from state police that were pretty high up in state police. They had rank and they had experience in investigations, and from other agencies that came with us that had experience in investigations. But yeah, I oversaw a lot of them.
We were recruiting top-notch deputies at that time.
Yeah, we had some good deputies.
We were,
plus some of the ones that were still here were pretty good. Even though they had their own agendas, they were pretty good. They just didn't want to get on board. You know, they could have made a difference, but they chose to sit in the back and just, drag their feet.
Yeah, I think I did the best I could to help everyone succeed. The effort wasn't to rid them of get rid of them. The effort was to help them succeed, but some just didn't want to be part of the effort. As I saw it, there were issues that needed to be addressed, and you were either going to be a part of the solution or part of the problem. And I had really hoped that everyone wanted to be a part of the solution. Vinny, is there any one case, as we sit here that you remember that you might want to talk about for a few minutes?
I remember all of them, all the big ones. We had some, I don't know, I think the one that stuck with me the most was just, was that crash where that little boy died. That was senseless, and the person responsible should have got time here, but because of his immigration status, he didn't do no time. He's got to live with it because he was related to the boy, but that one just always sticks with me.
Yeah, there was that accident happened in the Llano off Caballo Lane. Caballo Quino.
I think that's what the road was called.
I remember that case vividly.
Yeah.
And as I recall, he was a grandfather, the person you're talking about, and he had his grandson sitting on his lap, and basically they were driving up and down the road.
Yeah, letting the little boy, he was a 5-year-old boy, he was letting him steer.
So in the accident, and correct me if I'm wrong, as they're headed down the road, the truck veers off into the...
Yeah, the little boy was in the lap, and he wanted to go faster. And the grandpa said, no, we're going. And they're just barely going, letting on the truck's own idle. And the little boy slid off his lap, and he pressed the gas. He was on the floorboard, and he pressed the gas. And the grandfather went to get him, and of course the truck accelerated, hit the washboard, and it turned, because he wasn't holding the steering wheel, and it turned, and there was an embankment, if you remember, and it hit hard, and then the truck went over. Back end went over the front, windshield busted, the little boy was ejected, and the truck landed on top of him. The grandfather jumped out, ran up the road to his house, got some help. Him and his brother-in-laws and some other men went, and they pulled the truck off, the little boy, and took him to the house, and he didn't survive that.
Vinny, I think we're just about out of time, and I want to ask you, would you come back for another visit with us?
Oh yeah, sure.
And we'd love to have you. In fact, let me tell you, I'd like to have you for a few more visits before we move on. What I'd like to do at a certain point, Vince, is I also want to do. I want to share with our audience what prison life was like, and in doing that, I want to show them some of the cooking that we did. I don't think I've ever shared this with you, Vinny, but when I came out of prison, I came out of prison with neuropathy. And I never understood this, and I really didn't do a whole lot of research. Here's what's important. The care provider that helped me helped nurse me back to health told me that the cause of my neuropathy was malnutrition, and that came from my time in prison. Anyhow, I hope to see you back soon, Vinny, and we'll go through a few more episodes. I want to thank you for joining us.
Sure, no problem.